Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, friends and neighbors. Today is the first day after the new year of Easter, after Easter Sunday. It's a blustery, strange day here in Minnesota where you have snow, blinding snow, 1 minute, and it flips and suddenly it's sunny out and blue sky. It's very, very odd. So it's a cold day, though I hear it's supposed to get warmer. So, April in Minnesota, right? One that april with the Sarah shoot hath bathed, hath every vein pierced to the road, and bathed every vein in swish the cour of which engendered is the fleur, blah, 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 as Chaucer says. So here in Minnesota, we aren't ready yet for our pilgrimage. We are only ready for slightly going outside, maybe doing a little tinkering in the garden. But we are ready today, I think, maybe to read a bit more of William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. And the hope is that we will finish this play this week. I'm still debating on what next to read, but there are plenty of options there. I was thinking of reading some good poetry and reading perhaps Hamlet, one of my other favorite Shakespeare plays. Maybe even delving into reading something that is obscure, like The Lathe of Darkness, for instance, or maybe reading Wizard of Earthsea, something like that. That'd be fun. We'll see. Anyway, let's talk today a little bit about Shakespeare and the nature of tragedy, because we haven't really done much about that. So hopefully you have your substantial liquidation here, and you have your Romeo and Juliet copy with you, which there's mine, and you're ready to go here. We'll do a little bit of talk and a little bit of reading together, and we'll see what Shakespeare has to say to us. Now, the first thing that I want to point out here in reading is that when we do any kind of study of a text, we want to really try as much as possible to avoid reading into the text. Okay, so we don't want to come at a text and look for things we want to find. We don't want to come into a text and poke around with preconceived notions. That's called eisegesis, and that's not really legitimate. It's sort of like, I don't know, looking for post-feminist readings in Chaucer or in Beowulf, and they're not really there. Or if we wanted to read how Beowulf, for instance, was an economic struggle between the haves and the have-nots in a sort of Marxian way, it isn't. And so to read with that in mind, or trying to find that, really doesn't allow you to understand what the author wants you to take away from the text. So eisegesis is not something we want to do. The thing we try to do is to draw out of the text what the author is actually trying to say. And we do this by reading other commentators, by reading other texts that the author provides for us, by looking for little clues along the way in the text itself that will give us an idea of what the author is trying to do. And that's called exegesis. So you have eisegesis and exegesis. And if you want eisegesis, bad. Exegesis, good. Okay, so we want to do exegesis. And when we go to think about Shakespeare, it's always good to read commentators on him, but it's also good to read his other works, and it's good to read his sonnets. And it's also good to read texts that surrounded him or that were preceded him that he might be familiar with, because that allows us an insight into what he was thinking about, drawing from, working with, etc., etc., etc. We've already looked at 3 of his sonnets. We've looked at sonnet 147 most recently, and actually the most recent one I think was 116, Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. We've also looked at sonnet 147, which is My love is as a fever longing still. And I have made the claim so far that a lot of this play has been an embodiment of sonnet number 129, which is lust in action, and talking about lust in action. And just as a quick reminder of that, he says of lust in action, the expense of spirit and a waste of shame. He says, lust in action is perjured, murderous, bloody, full of blame, savage, extreme, rude, cruel, not to trust, Enjoyed, no sooner but despised straight. Past reason hunted, no sooner had, but past reason hated as a swallowed bait. On purpose laid to make the taker mad. Did you write all that down? Good. Good. Okay. So keep that in mind, because we're going to see a bit of that with young Miss Capulet here when we read. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that Shakespearean tragedy is not tragedy in the way that we use the word. So we use tragedy in a slightly different way than Shakespeare's audience would have thought. And I've been making the case up till now that Romeo and Juliet is not a romance, and even going so far as to suggest that Romeo and Juliet are not really likable characters. At least I don't find them likable. Other people might be entranced by them and think of them as lovely perfections of human virtue, but I don't tend to read it that way. Feel free to comment if you feel otherwise and you have an affinity with Juliet or with Romeo. But normally we say tragedy in the modern sense. Oh, it was a tragedy. 3 kittens drove a car off a cliff. It was a tragedy, that kind of thing. We talk about tragedy as bad things happening to good people for no apparent reason. And that's how we normally address tragedy in the modern world. That's not how Shakespeare's audience thought of tragedy. And this is another reason why I think his audience would not have seen Juliet or Romeo as particularly likable characters. Tragedy in Shakespeare's era took a great deal from Greek tragedy and Roman tragedy that preceded it, in the sense that those tragedies always dealt with certain elements that were also present in Shakespearean tragedy. Now, Shakespeare probably didn't have direct access to Greeks or Romans, at least not the majority of them, though there were some texts that had been printed during his era, and they had been put forth by Gutenberg and other publishers in a format that he could have had access to. But he would have had a sense of what tragedy was like, which was similar to what the ancients saw tragedy being. In the ancient world, tragedy, the very word, comes from 2 Greek words, tragos and oidos. And tragoidos was basically the making or the art of the goat, the song of the goat. It basically probably evolved from ancient cultures taking a goat and throwing it off a cliff as a sacrifice, where they would put ribbons on the goat and paint it up, and then they would either drive it out of the town or they'd throw it off a cliff, and all their sins would be driven out of the town with the goat. Okay, that was a sacrificial animal. He was the scapegoat, and in that sense, the little goat would sing a little song about how awful it was about this thing happening to him, and that's where we get tragoidos, tragedy. It might have been that earlier it was a human sacrifice. It's hard to say that human sacrifice was eventually replaced with a goat, and that's why a goat could sing a little song, which otherwise, a goat song would just be bleh, which wouldn't be very entertaining. But the tragoidos that we gained from the Greeks was essentially that song of the goat, the song of the sacrificial animal. And it was based upon the idea that the main character, the first sufferer, the protagonist, agonistus, this first sufferer was not a good, pure, perfect person. They were normally somebody who was wealthy or powerful or good-looking or young, and they normally were very proud. So they suffered from a character flaw, hamartia, that's what it's called, and that character flaw was normally pride. They thought they were the best thing since hot Kalamata olives, and so they were ready to take on the world. And in the midst of their pride, they could not see that they were doing wrong or harm to others. So that in Greek tragedy, the sense was that this whole event of ruination that occurs in the play was in order to reduce the main character to a place where they could recognize their own humility. Greek tragedy had a person falling from a high place to a low place due to circumstances that were not entirely beyond their control. They were circumstances that they themselves created or set up. Great thing to read if you get the chance is Aristotle's Poetics. He outlines all this business and does a great job of putting it forth in a fairly clear light. Now, Shakespeare, of course, who's writing 1600 and some plus years later than the Greek tragedians, is writing something similar, though not exactly the same. For Shakespeare, he deals with hamartia, but it's a character flaw. But he deals with other flaws besides pride. So he deals with things like lust in Romeo and Juliet, suspicion in Othello, and insecurity, vanity in King Lear, various different pride, for instance, in Coriolanus. He has various different flaws that he's dealing with in the course of his plays and his productions. Nevertheless, Shakespeare's tragedies, the plays that are labeled as tragedies, all of them are inevitable courses of action. They aren't just random things happening to the character. They are, from the start, the character has this flaw of some kind, and it leads to certain things happening that are inevitable, that are almost expected to happen. Of the characters, of the plays, that is, that he writes, there are 10 that can be classified as tragedies. They are Antony and Cleopatra, Coriolanus, Hamlet, Julius Caesar, Romeo and Juliet, King Lear, Macbeth, Othello, Timon of Athens, and Titus Andronicus. Okay, so those 10 are the 10 major tragedies of Shakespeare. Now, it could be that he was just labeling them that because that sells tickets. I don't know. But my suspicion is that he was creating those 10 plays as inevitable events, inevitable plots that derive from the character flaw of the main protagonist. Shakespeare also has in his plays this tragic waste, which it doesn't exist in Greek tragedy so much. And what is meant by that is that by the end of the play, the main characters are ruined, dead, destroyed, whatever, and they don't learn from the suffering and loss. There's in Greek tragedy, normally the main character, the protagonist, is alive at the end of the tragedy, and they have learned a tremendous lesson from going through this. In Shakespeare's tragedies, the main character normally dies. In fact, there's a joke that that Shakespeare, the play is over because there are corpses littering the stage. So in a Shakespeare play, normally the characters don't learn a lesson from whatever experience they go through. Nevertheless, the experience they go through is based upon their character flaw. So this leads me to think that when we look at Romeo and Juliet, we aren't looking at good, noble, young, beautiful characters, and it's so sad that these random things happen to them and other people oppress them, and they're driven to kill. Well, they're driven to tragedy, we'll put it that way, not to let the cat out of the bag. Rather, what we're looking at a hamartia, a flaw in these two characters that drives them to an inevitable end, and the end is a tragic waste. Because you could have had two young people who grew in virtue and might have fallen in love, might have gotten married, or might have married someone else. And because that is the case, we are dealing with this Shakespearean tragedy, which is not about good people. It is not about romance. It's about, tragedy, about awfulness. I think our modern sensation is to identify our own problems with things like teenage suicide, for instance, or rebellious teens, to identify that with Shakespeare's play. But I don't think that's what Shakespeare intended, and I don't think that's how his audience would have seen it. They probably would have known that these characters were flawed, and they probably would have seen that flaw playing out during the course of the tragedy, knowing almost from the second act that they were doomed. And if we want to look back at the beginning, knowing from the first act, from the prologue, that they were doomed. I mean, the prologue even says they're going to kill themselves. And so when that sort of thing happens, everybody knows it's going to happen. It's not like it's a mystery. Right? Now, that being said, if you disagree with this, if you have questions about it, feel free to comment. Feel free to leave a comment in the section. But this is essentially looking at the details of the work, which suggests that we're not dealing with a romance, and that Romeo and Juliet are both characters that are not. We shouldn't emulate them. Okay, that we shouldn't look to them for how we should live our lives. Maybe look to them for how we shouldn't live our lives. Now, I have plenty of reading here to do. This is in scene 2. Remember how I said earlier that the play, after a certain point, just like catapults towards the end. Act 4, almost from the beginning of Act 4, just takes off like a rocket. And most of Act 4 is concerning Juliet. It takes place in the Capulets' house, and it really doesn't leave there for most of Act 4. So we're going to be looking at... Somebody's pounding on the door. Oh, that's my son. Son's pounding on the door. You see the Legos behind me here, too. The Legos everywhere. So we're going to read today, and if we can, we're going to try and read all of Act 4, if we can get through all of that. I don't want to belabor the point, but it is a bit like being shot out of a cannon after Act 3, and just hurtles towards the end. So if we can, we'll read the majority of Act 4, and then we'll read some in Act 5 in subsequent episodes. So, fire up your liquid cannon there, and then we'll get Romeo and Juliet underway, and we'll read together. Romeo and Juliet, Act 4, Scene 2. A hall in Capulet's house. Enter Capulet, Lady Capulet, nurse, and 2 serving men. Capulet says, "So many guests, invite as here are writ. Sirrah, go hire me 20 cunning cooks." The second servant says, "You shall have none ill, sir, for I'll try if they can lick their fingers." "How canst thou try them so?" says Capulet. "Marry, sir, 'tis an ill cook that cannot lick his own fingers. Therefore he that cannot lick his fingers goes not with me." "Go, be gone," says Capulet. Exit the second servant. "We shall be much unfurnished for this time. What, is my daughter gone to Friar Lawrence?" The nurse says, "Aye, forsooth." "Well, he may chance to do some good on her. A peevish, self-willed harlotry it is." Enter Juliet. "See where she comes from shrift with merry look," says the nurse. "How now, my headstrong? Where have you been gadding?"
"Where I have learned me to repent the sin of disobedient opposition to you and your behests," says Juliet, "and am enjoined by holy Lawrence to fall prostrate here, to beg your pardon. Pardon, I beseech you. Henceforward I am ever ruled by you."
Capulet says, "Send for the county. Go tell him of this. I'll have this knot knit up tomorrow morning."
"I met the youthful lord at Lawrence's cell, and gave him what becomed love I might, not stepping o'er the bounds of modesty."
"Why, I am glad on't. This is well. Stand up. This is as it should be. Let me see the county. Aye, may I go, I say, and fetch him hither. Now, afore God, this reverend holy friar, all our whole city is much bound to him."
"Nurse, will you go with me into my closet to help me sort such needful ornaments as you think fit furnish me tomorrow?"
Lady Capulet says,
"No, not till Thursday. There's time enough."
"Go, nurse," says Capulet. "Go with her. We'll to church tomorrow." Exeunt Juliet and the nurse.
"We shall be short in our provision," says Lady Capulet. "'Tis now near night."
"Tush, I will stare about," says Lord Capulet. and all things shall be well. I warn thee, wife. Go thou to Juliet, help to deck up her. I'll not to bed tonight. Let me alone. I'll play the housewife for this once. What? Oh, they are all forth. Well, I will walk myself to County Paris to prepare him up against tomorrow. My heart is wondrous light, since this same wayward girl is so reclaimed. Exeunt. That's kind of sad. Lord Capulet is just so excited. He's so excited. Notice he shifts the wedding back a day. They're planning to have it on Thursday, and now it's Tuesday, and Capulet says, let's do it tomorrow. He's so excited to have his daughter married. Kind of sad, especially knowing what's going to happen. So, my son's yelling in the back, so pardon the noise. Scene 3, Juliet's chamber. Enter Juliet and the nurse. Ay, those attires are best. But, gentle nurse, I pray thee, leave me to myself tonight, for I have need of many orisons, to move the heavens to smile upon my state, which thou well knowest is cross and full of sin. Enter Lady Capulet. What, are you busy, ho? Need you my help? No, madam. We have called such necessaries as are behoveful for our state tomorrow. So please you let me now be left alone, and let the nurse this night sit up with you, for I am sure you have your hands full all in this so sudden business. Lady Capulet says, good night. Get thee to bed and rest, for thou hast need. Exeunt Lady Capulet and the nurse. Farewell. God knows when we shall meet again. I have a faint cold fear thrills through my veins that almost freezes up the heat of life. I'll call them back again to comfort me. Nurse! What should she do here? My dismal senile needs must act alone. Come, Vial. What if this mixture do not work at all? Shall I be married then tomorrow morning? No. No, this shall forbid it. Lie thou there. She lays down a dagger. What if it be a poison, which the friar subtly hath ministered to have me dead, lest in this marriage he should be dishonoured, because he married me before to Romeo? Oh, fear it is, and it methinks it should not, for he hath still been tried a holy man. How if, when I am laid into the tomb, I wake before the time that Romeo come to redeem me? Oh, that's a fearful point. Shall I not then be stifled in the vault, to whose foul mouth no healthsome air breathes in, and there die strangled ere my Romeo comes? Oh, if I live, is it not very like the horrible conceit of death and night, together with the terror of the place, as in a vault, an ancient receptacle, what, for this many 100 years, the bones of all my buried ancestors are packed, where bloody Tybalt, yet but green in earth, lies festering in his shroud, where, as they say at some hours in the night, spirits resort. Alack, alack, it is not like that I, so early waking, what with loathsome smells and shrieks like mandrakes torn out of the earth, that living mortals hearing them run mad. Oh, if I wake, shall I not be distraught, environed with all these hideous fears, and madly play with my forefather's joints, and pluck the mangled Tybalt from his shroud, and in this rage with some great kinsman's bone, as with a club dash up my desperate brains? Oh, look, methinks I see my cousin's ghost, seeking out Romeo, that did spit his body upon a rapier's point. Stay, Tybalt, stay. Romeo, I come. This do I drink to thee. And she falls upon the bed, within the curtains. Scene 4, the hall in Capulet's house. Enter Lady Capulet and the nurse. Lady Capulet.
Hold. Take these keys and fetch more spices. Nurse. They call for dates and quinces in the pastry, says the nurse. Enter Lord Capulet.
Come, stir, stir, stir. The second cock hath crowed, the curfew bell hath rung, 'tis 3 o'clock. Look to the baked meats, good Angelica. Spare not for cost. The nurse says, Go, you cot queen, go. Go you to bed, faith. You'll be sick tomorrow for this night's watching.
No, not a whit. Oh, what? I watched here now all night for lesser cause, and never been sick. Lady Capulet says, Aye, you have been a mouse hunt in your time, but I will watch you from such watching now.
Exhaled Lady Capulet to the nurse. A jealous hood, a jealous hood. Enter 3 or 4 serving men with spits and logs and baskets. Now, fellow, what's there? What's there? Oh, things for the cook, sir, but I know not what. Oh, make haste, says Lord Capulet. Sirrah, fetch dryer lugs. Call Peter, he will show thee where they are. I have a head, sir, that will find our logs and never trouble Peter for that matter. Mass and well said, ha! A merry horse, son, ha! Thou shalt be a loggerhead. Good faith, 'tis day. The county will be here with music straight, for so he said he would. I hear him near. Nurse! Wife! What ho? What, nurse, I say? Re-enter the nurse. Go and waken Juliet. Go and trim her up. I'll go and chat with Paris. Hi, make haste. Make haste. The bridegroom he is. Come already. Make haste, I say. And they all leave, exeunt. Interesting to note in there where he says a jealous hood. That's jealousy, right? Jealousy. In other words, Lady Capulet, who's just said you're a woman chaser, right? You're a mouse hunt. You were a woman chaser in your time, and I'll watch you from such watching now. I'll make sure you don't chase any women. And Capulet says, she's jealous of my, affections for other women. Which, marital strife. Could also be, jealousy for his love for his daughter, which he is now so on fire with that he's staying up all night to make sure everything's ready for her wedding the next day. So, could be that Lady Capulet is jealous, to a certain degree, of the love that Lord Capulet shows for his daughter. It has been known to happen. Anyway, the nurse goes to go wake up Juliet, right? Scene 5, Act 4, Scene 5. Juliet's chamber. Enter the nurse. Mistress! What mistress, Juliet? Fast I want, she? Why, lamb, why, lady, fie, you slug o' bed, why, love, I say, madam, sweetheart, why, bride, what that a word? You take your penny's worth now. Sleep for a week. For the next night, I warrant, the county Paris has set up his rest, that you shall rest but little. God forgive me. Mary and Amen, how sound is she asleep? I needs must wake her. Madam! I let the county take you in your bed. He'll fright you up, faith. Will it not be? She undraws the curtains. What? Dressed and in your clothes and down again? I must needs wake you. Lady! Oh, alas! Help! My lady's dead! Oh, well a day that if I was born! Some aqua vitae, my lord! My lady! Enter Lady Capulet. What noise is here? Oh, lamentable day! What is the matter? Look, oh, heavy day! Oh me, my child, my only life, revive, look up, or I will die with thee. Help, call help. Enter Capulet. For shame! Bring Juliet forth, her lord has come. Oh, she's dead, deceased, she's dead, alack the day, she's dead. Huh? Let me see her. Out! Oh,
Alas, she's cold. Oh, her blood is settled and her joints are stiff. Life and these lips have long been separated. Death lies on her like an untimely frost upon the sweetest flower of all the field. Oh, lamentable day! Oh, woeful time! Death, that hath taken her hence to make me wail, ties up my tongue, will not let me speak. Enter Friar Lawrence in Paris with musicians. Friar Lawrence.
Come, is the bride ready to go to church?
Ready to go, but never to return, says Lord Capulet. Oh, son, the night before thy wedding day hath death lain with thy wife. See, there she lies, flower as she was deflowered by him. Death is my son-in-law. Death is my heir. My daughter he hath wedded. I will die, and leave him all life, living all his deaths. Have I thought long to see this morning's face, and doth it give me such a sight as this? Says Paris. Accursed, unhappy, wretched, hateful day, says Lady Capulet. Most miserable hour that e'er time saw in lasting labour of his pilgrimage. But one poor loving child, but one thing to rejoice and solace in, and cruel death hath catched it from my sight. Oh, woe! Oh, woeful day! Most lamentable day, most woeful day, that ever I did yet behold! Oh, day, oh, day, oh, day! Oh, hateful day! Never was seen so black a day as this. Oh, woeful day, oh, woeful day! Begosed, wronged, spited, slain, says Paris. Most detestable death by thee beguiled, by cruel, thee quite overthrown. O love, O life, not life, but love and death. Capulet says, despised, distressed, and hated, martyred, killed, uncomfortable time, why camest thou now to murder our solemnity? O child, my soul, not my child, dead art thou. Alack, my child is dead, and with my child my joys are buried. Friar Lawrence. Peace! Oh, for shame! Confusion's cure lives not in these confusions. Heaven and yourself had part in this fair maid, and all the better is it for the maid. Your part in her you could not keep from death, but heaven keeps his part in eternal life. The most you sought was her promotion, but 'twas your heaven she should be advanced. And weep ye now, seeing she is advanced above the clouds, as high as heaven itself? Oh, in this love you love your child so ill, that you run mad, seeing that she is well. She's not well married that lives married long, and she's best married that dies married young. Dry up your tears, and stick your rosemary on this fair course, and, as the custom is, in all her best array bear her to church. For though fond nature bids us all lament, yet nature's tears are reason's merriment. All things we adorn for festival turn from their office to black funeral, our instruments to melancholy bells, our wedding cheer to a sad burial feast, our solemn hymns to sullen dirges change, our bridal flowers serve for a buried corse, and all things change them to the contrary. Sir, go you in, and madam, go you with him, and go, Sir Paris, every one prepare to follow this fair course under her grave. The heavens do lower upon you for some ill. Move them no more by crossing their high will. Exeunt Capulet, Lady Capulet, Paris, and the friar. First musician says, Faith, we may put up our pipes and be gone. Honest good fellows, put up, says the nurse, for, well, you know, this is a pitiful case. She exits. First musician says, Aye, by my troth, the case may be amended. Enter Peter. Musicians, heart's ease, oh, and you will have me live. Play heart's ease. Why heart's ease? Oh, musicians, because My heart itself. Plays my heart is full of woe. Oh, play me some merry dump to comfort me.
Not a dump, we. 'Tis no time to play now.
You will not, then?
No.
I will then give it you soundly.
What will you give us?
No money, on my faith, but the gleek. I will give you the minstrel.
Then will I give you the serving creature.
Then will I lay the serving creature's dagger on your pate. I will carry no crotchets. I'll ray you, I'll fire you. Do you note me?
And you ray us and fire us, you note us. Second musician says,
Pray you, put up your dagger, and put out your wit. Then have at you with my wit. I will dry beat you with an iron wit, and put up my iron dagger. Answer me like men. When griping grief the heart doth wound, and doleful dumps the mind oppress, the music with their silver sound. Why silver sound? Why music with their silver sound? What say you, Simon Catling?
Marry, sir, because silver hath a sweet sound.
Pretty. What say you, Hugh Rebeck?
I say silver sound, because musicians sound for silver.
Pretty, too. What say you, James Soundpost?
Faith, I know not what to say.
I cry you mercy. You are the singer. I'll say for you. It is music with her silver sound, because musicians have no gold for sounding. Then music with her silver sound with speedy help doth lend redress.
He exits. What a pestilent knave is this same. Hang him, Jack. Come, we'll in here. Tarry for the mourners, and stay for dinner.
Exeunt. And that ends Act 4.
And like I said, Act 4 just like being shot out of a cannon. It's just one thing after another, and suddenly Juliet's dead. And they're all mourning like mad. Some people have suggested before that the mourning that goes on when they find Juliet dead is excessive. It may be in reading. I think on stage when they're all doing it at the same time, because you can't do that in text. But you can do it at the same time on stage. They can all speak at the same time. And when they do, the sense that one gets actually is that this is heartfelt. I think that the reaction of Lord Capulet and the nurse is extremely heartfelt. They really think she's dead, right? They have no idea that she's taken a potion that will allow her to wake up again. As a matter of fact, in that long, worrisome speech that Juliet gives, she has no idea she's taken a potion that's going to wake her up again. I mean, she's been told that by Friar Lawrence, but she even thinks maybe he's lying to her. What if he has given her poison and she's really going to die? And she's terrified of it. And the thing that prompts her to take it finally is just that she wants to see Romeo again. But when they discover her dead corpse, her corpse, they all have this reaction of, this is really awful. And they're moaning and weeping about it. I mean, even Lady Capulet comes in and says, this is really bad. I think that her subdued reactions to Juliet while she was alive, suddenly the dam breaks and you realize Lady Capulet too has affection for her daughter, even though she's tried to suppress it. And even though she's annoyed with her frequently. And then there's that very odd, I think, reaction of Friar Lawrence. And this is another reason for me not to like Friar Lawrence very much. Friar Lawrence, we know as viewers of the play, we know that Friar Lawrence knows Juliet is not dead. You know, it's like the Monty Python. It's not dead, it's only sleeping, right? Friar Lawrence knows she's not dead, she's only sleeping. And that she will come alive again. But if you're an outside observer, and if you see dead Juliet and the reactions of mom and dad and the nurse, and they are really distraught, and even Paris is distraught by this, and then Friar Lawrence says, oh, stop crying. You know, she's in heaven now. Everything's fine. God loves her. And it's because of some fault of your own that she died. And if that was what the priest said, what would be your reaction? What would you think of that priest saying those certain things? Wouldn't that be, I don't know, offensive to say the least? It seems to me that Friar Lawrence, from an outside observer, comes across as being really cold and emotionless in this, and cruel almost, when he says that the heavens do lower upon you for some ill, right? Move them no more by crossing their high will. Get that girl into the grave, because she died because God was against you. You must have done something wrong that caused the death of your daughter, and now you need to get her in the grave. Imagine being the parent of that kid that died, and the priest says, well, she died because of your sins. That would, I think, be offensive to say the least, and cruel, and heartless, and emotionless. Now, we know as an audience that Friar Lawrence is trying to move the ball forward so that Juliet can be in the grave, so she can wake up, so Romeo can find her, blah, 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 blah. But if we didn't know that, what he has to say would be, I think, highly negative. And I think it's tremendously telling that Shakespeare sets up the scene, the emotional content of the scene here, so that Lord Capulet, who is all on fire to get his daughter married, he's all excited and happy about it, is completely clueless when the thunderbolt hits of her death. He doesn't see it coming at all, and so it's much more impact. It has much more impact as an emotional response. And even when the nurse comes in, she doesn't see it coming either, because she hasn't been part of Juliet's plans. And so the nurse, who, remember, is like the mother to Juliet, comes in and finds her daughter dead on the bed. It's an awful business. And as an audience, we can say certainly, well, Juliet's going to wake up, but if we didn't know that, it would be horrible to come in and find your daughter, dead in that way. Juliet's speech before she takes the vial has always struck me as interesting too, because here she has a long soliloquy. It's called a soliloquy, is where the character expresses their inner thoughts to the audience. They're alone and they express what they're thinking and feeling. And here she expresses about her worries about, what if I'm going to take poison and really die? Or what if I take this potion and then I wake up and Romeo's not there and I'm trapped in the tomb with all those bones and I go crazy and I beat my head in with the femur of my uncle or whatever. Or if I grab Tybalt or whatever. And she kind of works herself up through these fears, which we could say are legitimate. It's true. But it's also hearkening back to that whole idea that lust unbridled is fearful. It's a fearful condition to be in. It's a condition where you're always terrified of being trapped, or terrified of finding yourself in a tomb, and the world being a tomb. And Juliet is terrified. She's going to wake up and find herself in a tomb suddenly. And then she has this really, I find this startling. She has this moment at the end of that soliloquy where I really think she begins to see, either she sees her cousin Tybalt's ghost, or else she begins to go a little bit nutty at the end of this through her fear. She says, "Oh, look, methinks I see my cousin's ghost seeking out Romeo, that did spit his body upon a rapier's point. Stay, Tybalt, stay." Right? Like she's suddenly seeing Tybalt there with her. And if we look at the backstory, imagine for a minute the backstory to all this. What was the relationship between Tybalt and Juliet? They were cousins. Did they play together? Did they grow up together? Did Tybalt look out for her? Was he like the older brother, always trying to make sure she was safe? Did she have a friendship with him, so when Romeo stabs him, there really was a reaction of anger and sorrow? Tybalt comes across as being just this violent, hot-headed type of character. But he has a backstory. And I think his backstory with Juliet is one to consider, especially given this speech where she seems to see his ghost. And then finally she says, "Romeo, I come, this do I drink to thee. Romeo, I come, this do I come to you, Romeo." Interesting. If Romeo is somewhat dead already, in the nurse is called Romeo dead, and he's essentially dead to her because she's exiled, then when she drinks that vial, even knowing that she was going to wake up again, is there an element of suicide here? Is there an element of killing herself in this scene? I tend to think that is, you could read something about that. She longs for death. She longs for the grave. She longs to be quit of this world. All her plans being thrown into tumult, so to speak, and being away from Romeo and not being able to get what she wants. I think that she's a character who's really desperate. And then there's this last scene. What do you make of this? This is in scene 5, Act 4, scene 5. You get these three guys, right? These three musicians, Simon Catling, Hugh Rebeck, and James Soundpost. A rebec is a 3-stringed fiddle, and Catling is a lute, a string. So you get these three guys, lute and fiddle and soundpost, who are musicians who've been hanging around with Paris when he comes up to the house. And they come in, and everybody's weeping and mourning, and so they don't have any work. And they're not going to get paid, and they're not going to get any dinner. And Peter comes in, and he says, play a really sad song, say a comforting song for us, because we're so sad. Play Heart's Ease. And they kind of look at each other like, well, that's not on our repertoire. We didn't plan to play that. And Peter's like, you better do it or I'm going to beat you up. Remember, Peter's a younger guy, right? You better do it or I'm going to beat you up. And then he goes off on the tangent, like in the middle of his thing. Like, why Silver Sound? Squirrel. He's suddenly distracted by the idea of why would the verse be Silver Sound? And the three musicians are like, yeah, whatever. We'll play if you want us to play. And then finally they say, yeah, let's hang around. We'll tarry here and play some music for the people who are weeping, and maybe there'll be our dinner. We'll get some food. And so they all leave. They don't care that Juliet's dead. And I find that, I don't know, I just find that amusing as anything, that Shakespeare would throw in, after a really sad scene, would throw in this scene of these three rock stars who are just like, whatever, as long as we get some food, they're not there to weep and mourn. They're there just to play music. So like the outside world goes on, doesn't really care that Juliet's dead. Why would he do that? Why would he end that tragic scene with this comical scene? It's a bit like what the ancient world used to do with the satyr plays. When you had the tragedies, and then suddenly you had a satirical play after the sets of tragedies. Kind of like that. Though it also strikes me that if you played that whole scene out and had those musicians in there, it would be very strange pacing for a movie or what have you, or even for a drama. It'd be strange pacing, I think, to have people laughing at the end of all that weeping and mourning. Interesting. Well, that brings us to the end of Act 4, and we start Act 5 next, which is back to Romeo. So all of Act 4 was Juliet, and Act 5 is Romeo and joining up with Juliet again. But we'll read that at a future date. Until that time, I think I'll call it quits for today. And if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to put them in the sidebars. I'll be glad to answer anything. And as always, thank you so much for joining me. It's quite a pleasure for me to be able to read to you these great works. If you had suggestions about what I could read next, be it Hamlet or Wizard of Earthsea or poetry, The Wasteland came to mind the other day. I'd love to hear from you, hear what you'd like to discuss and read next. I highly suggest that you check out the Shakespeare 2020 program, and I suggest also, as usual, the podcast of the History of the English Language. That's a great podcast. And also Ian McKellen, who's continuing to read these sonnets of Shakespeare. I really recommend that you check that out too. Also, check out my Patreon page if you get the chance to. I would appreciate any contribution you're willing to make. My family would appreciate it too. Until we meet again, thank you so much. Stay healthy, stay safe. God bless you all.